We are joined now by a man who I think early on in COVID was certainly a trusted advisor to the government. Then I think he probably said some things that made the government think maybe he wasn't entirely on their team, but he is still one of our leading, if not our leading, public health academic. His name is Professor Des Gorman. He is a professor of medicine at the University of Auckland, and Des joins us now. Des, welcome to the program. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and congratulations on the platform and how well you're doing. Good for you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, where do you want to start? Oh, look, let's deal with the COVID thing first. Yesterday, well, a week and a half ago, we have Dr. Michael Baker on, and I quizzed him about what appears to be in the media, or appeared to have been, the died of COVID statistic, which was the only statistic we got, the died of COVID statistic, and mainstream media turned that into the New Zealand COVID death toll. And I quizzed Michael Baker as to whether or not that was accurate, and he said no, but we can't break down the data. Then yesterday, the day before, the Ministry of Health suddenly says, no, we can give you the figures of how many people have died of COVID. And it is in fact half of what I think the generally accepted New Zealand COVID death toll was. I think that is a significant difference, or creates a significant difference in public perception and concern and malleability around COVID policy. Do you think that information or that statistic was kept from us for good reason, or that was simply an oversight by the Ministry of Health and the government?
Yeah, well, it's a truism, I think, Sean, that if you're trying to distinguish between clever conspiracy and incompetence, choose incompetence, because it's almost always the correct explanation for something. So I suspect the ministry didn't know. People dying with positive COVID tests were dying from all sorts of reasons and being lumped in the COVID basket. And to be fair, that suited the government's rhetoric at the time, which was trying to get public behaviour online through fear. And I think in the same way, I think that the COVID pandemic has been managed very politically, and that's true for most countries, I may add. It is also being managed by manipulating the public through fear. Tens of thousands of deaths were forecast at the very beginning. And now, of course, when you point out that we haven't had tens of thousands of deaths,
we've had about 500 in 2 years.
And people say, haven't we done well? So it actually is a cyclic argument. You make a crazy prediction which scares the living daylights out of people and encourages compliance. And then when you don't actually experience those ridiculous estimates, you claim success. So I think the ministry didn't know. I think it's, from a death certificate, it's impossible to derive whether the person died of heart failure or myocarditis from COVID. But I think it suited them to have inflated figures.
Wow, so you are going conspiracy theory here, or convenient conspiracy.
Yeah, look, I think we have seen data manipulation from the get-go around COVID. I don't think they're making numbers up, but you can interpret, as you know, you can manage statistics any way you choose. But I think if you remember, Sean, right at the very beginning, we had Sean Hendy using that Imperial College methodology to predict tens of thousands of deaths. That set the scene for the whole management of the pandemic, and it terrified people. And fear is a great motivating factor for a while. I don't believe you should ever manage the public through fear. I think you manage them through honest discourse, because the trouble with fear is that when it doesn't manifest, when your predictions don't manifest, then instead of having sustained good behaviours, people revert back to how they behaved before.
And there's a fair chunk of cynicism and scepticism abroad about public health measures now, and we seem to have a new conspiracy emerging, that this new WHO pandemic pact is going to cede sovereignty to New Zealand, and I don't know, Bill Gates and his stormtroopers are going to take over the country. Have you looked at that issue, Des, which has certainly created controversy here on the platform and amongst our listeners and correspondents? What do you think of the Pandemic Pact, which, as I understand it, won't even be in its first draft form for at least a couple of years?
Oh, I think that's true. I think the world was caught completely unprepared for this sort of global pandemic, and New Zealand was one of the least prepared countries. In fact, the only prepared countries are those who had experienced SARS-1, SARS-2 and MERS, and they had been sensitised to the problems of this sort of viral epidemic, and they were ready, but the rest of the world wasn't. You saw public health measures fail miserably in the US. You saw a level of distrust between the public and public health advice. You saw all sorts of problems in convincing people that vaccination was a good idea. So I think what we're seeing is a continuation of a complete breach of trust between government, public health and the public. And in that breach, all sorts of conspiracies can thrive. And I think some of the conspiracies that we heard around the immunisation were, to put it mildly, quite extraordinary.
Should people be worried that the WHO pandemic pact or draft pact is some attempt at one world government by Joe Biden, or is that just fanciful nuttiness on the internet?
Yeah, look, I think it is fanciful. I mean, I wouldn't call it nuttiness, because that would be depreciating people who have genuine concerns in this regard. But the idea that the world politic could behave in a coordinated and intelligent way is extremely far-fetched. I mean, that's conferring on them a level of intelligence and competence that they don't have. I mean, if you've watched the WHO, the WHO is an interesting organisation, Sean. I've worked for them at a country level. For example, they asked me to help the Philippines government introduce the Universal Healthcare Coverage Act. And at a country level, there are some very, very good people. But my opinion, at a global level, the WHO is a political organisation run by bureaucrats who are good at talking about things, but not very good at doing things.
All right, Des, let's bring it back home with the health budget we've just had. The DHBs are going, $11 billion new spending in health, bringing low, middle-income families' dental care more under the purview of the state, and some new funding, some new rules for Pharmac. Do you think the spending on health that you've seen on this budget is money well spent? And I know we talked recently at a conference, and you said it's all about whether or not the person who is the consumer, the service they're getting is improved or not. Is this money well spent in this budget?
I think we can agree, Sean, that health needs a rejig or a reset. I think we can agree that we need more money into groups like Pharmac, if we need Pharmac at all. I mean, we certainly are lagging behind Australia in terms of the drugs that New Zealanders have access to. I think we can all agree that we need to invest more in dental care, because poor oral health is a major contributor to the reduced life expectancy of Maori and Pacifica and people who are doing it tough financially. We can agree on all those things. But the question is this the health reform New Zealand needs to improve our experience of healthcare? And in my view, it's not. It is fundamentally a structural reform. And the history of structural reforms is they don't result in spontaneous outbreaks of better health experience. Any service industry knows that to reform that service industry, you need to have an absolute focus on customer experience. And the customers here being the people who consume healthcare, the people who provide healthcare, and so on. And what sort of experience do you want to enable? Well, if you look at these health reforms, it's very difficult to see just what the anticipated or the expected or the desired experience is. This is ideologically driven structural reform. We've seen it before, we'll see it again. We're going, we have centralised command and control, then decentralised, then centralised, and flip-flop. And I was speaking to Graham Scott, who was one of the former Secretary of the Treasury. You probably know Graham.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
He was the last chairman of the Health Funding Authority. And he thinks this is somewhat amusing that given the last Labor government disestablished the Health Funding Authority, a centralised health agency, which he was chairman of the board, and the next Labor government has recreated it on steroids. So if you live long enough and you hang around long enough, you just see this cycle bureaucratic shifting. So my concern is this $11 billion, which could have made a material difference to healthcare, will end up being consumed by a growing
New
bureaucracy.
letterhead. It'll be new letterhead, new
Yep.
logos and new corporate branding, and not new hell or more money for people who are sick.
Oh, precisely. I think it's hard to imagine that the bureaucracy will contract and that back office costs will decline when you're replacing 20 DHBs with 4 regional management authorities and between 60 and 80 localities. We don't know how many yet. We don't know quite what they're going to do or where they're going to be. So yes, you're getting rid of 20 DHBs into a central health bureaucracy, but then you're creating quite a complex structure where you're going to have regional coordinating agencies, and you're going to have localities, and you're going to have PHOs. It's impossible to imagine that the net effect of this won't be a shift of money from the front line to the back office, and that's the dead opposite of what we're trying, or we should be trying to achieve. The other thing, Sean, I'd observe is that as we try to move from a injury and illness management system to a health system, and there is a fundamental difference between an injury and illness management system and a health system, we've got to shift funding out of hospitals, into the community, into people's homes, and we've got to get upstream. If you want to manage the mental health burden in New Zealand and reduce suicides, you've got to attend to the social determinants of disease, which are living conditions, education, and so on. So I ask this question: what is it in this budget that is going to shift the focus of healthcare from hospitals into people's homes? That's going to increase individual responsibility for their health, and that's going to materially affect the social determinants of disease. This money would have been better spent, Sean, with due respect, on housing, education, and employment assistance for young people.
Because that in its own way is health spending, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And our problem here is that we have siloed MSD, we have housing siloed, we have justice siloed, we have health siloed. So where we need the health spend is where it has the biggest social impact to enable people to be independent and to participate in society. I mean,
so you're saying we don't need to spend on the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We don't even need to spend on the fence at the top of the cliff. We need to get rid of the cliff.
Exactly right. And so the question is, what is it in this budget that's going to shift the point of health focus from hospital care to greater individual responsibility? I mean, you can increase the number of beds for hemodialysis if you like, but a much smarter thing is to actually get into people who have pre-diabetes and manage them so they don't become diabetic. You've got to get upstream, and there's nothing in this reform that's going to drive health interventions upstream.
You have recently, Des, and tell me to stop if you don't want to discuss it, you've got your own very real and very present health issues going on at the moment, and you told at that conference where an amazing story about the difference between what we're providing publicly and privately. And I wonder if you'd mind sharing it with our listeners, our audience today.
No, I'm happy to do that, Sean. I have a very rare form of lung cancer. It's not related to smoking. It's called a neuroendocrine tumour. So it's a tumour which develops out of endocrine cells. I didn't know I had it until about 2 and a bit years ago. And by the time I discovered it, it had spread to different parts of my body. But these neuroendocrine tumours are very slow growing. So if you had to choose a form of lung cancer, this is probably the one you'd choose. But the point you make too was a comment I made at that conference we were at, and that was I was discovered to have a little tiny tumour in my brain sitting on my pineal gland, only about 1.5 centimetres, so very small little tumour, but it was blocking the flow of fluid around my brain. So I got hydrocephalus and I was very unwell. And when it came time to treat that with radiotherapy, because that's the way you treat this particular tumour in a site like that, I was going to go, like everyone else, just along to the Auckland Hospital Radiation Oncology group and get treated. But my treating physicians and my colleagues who are oncologists took me aside and said, don't do that. The technology available for you in private is substantively better. And instead of irradiating a large part of your brain, they're able to just irradiate that 1.5 centimetre tumour. So they said, put your hand in your pocket and pay for the difference, which I did. It cost me about $23,000 for that radiation treatment. And of course, as I was lying there on the table having this radiotherapy, I thought, well, this is just wrong at every level. If I'm a New Zealander who can't afford to pay $23,000, I'm having to accept inferior quality care. There's nothing right about that. So I don't think there's any argument that our health system is riddled with inequity. There's no doubt that our health system has maldistributions of investment in workforce. But what is it about this budget that's going to materially, health budget, that's going to materially change inequity? There are three things that drive health reforms, Sean. Clearly, they have to be focused on customer experience, but they are value. Where's the value proposition? How do you define the value? How do you extract value? The second thing is sustainability, and that's a really big deal for health systems worldwide now. What does sustainability mean and how do you derive it? And the third one is equity, because if health systems are subservient to community need, then it's all about enabling people to participate more fully in society. My particular political view is that I'm not a fan of wealth redistribution, I'm a fan of wealth creation. And I look at this budget and I think, what is it about this budget that's going to create wealth? What is it about this budget that's going to increase community participation? And from a health point of view, I can't see that that's even been a lens applied to this investment.
Some extra spending for what we call Maori Health in this budget. And if you look at the statistics and you choose to slice people up into ethnicities, there's no doubt Maori are not apparently as healthy or getting as much as the rest of us. Does slicing them off into their own health system, does that solve that problem or not, Des?
In my view, it doesn't, and I'll declare a conflict of interest here. My grandmother was a Maori woman. She was Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Kuri. So I have a very personal interest in Maori Health, Sean. In my view, it's most likely to result in an abrogation of system responsibility for Maori Health. I'll give you an analogy. Some of the worst health and safety performance I've seen in companies have very strong health and safety officers, and the rest of the company says, "You beauty, not my problem." That's the problem of the health and safety office. So my real fear about a Maori Health Authority is, first of all, where are the competent practitioners coming from to engage in sophisticated commissioning? Secondly, any conflicts between them and Health New Zealand will have to be resolved by the Minister. And thirdly, will it enable the rest of the health system to abrogate its responsibility? And very quickly, when I was on the board at ACC, I was aware of just how poorly ACC performs for Maori. And I was told that we had a Maori Health unit and that increased the investment in that. And I said, look, that's not what we want. We don't want a Maori Health unit that delivers to Maori. We want a Maori Health unit that enables every single person in this corporation to meet their responsibilities to Maori. So my view is, yes, I'm pleased to see investment in Maori Health, but do I think that this particular structure is the right way to go? I suspect not.
All right, Des, look, I want to loop round to the start of the interview again, and thank you for that amazing analysis on the health budget. My question is COVID over? Should we still be wearing masks? Is it time for the country to move on?
Sadly, COVID will be with us, Sean, for at least 2 to 3, if not 5 years. It'll continue to make some people very sick. It will provide a double whammy during winter in terms of the concurrence with influenza. There are two approaches you can take. One is damn the torpedoes, let's just all get sick and hope that gives us some sustained immunity. The other is to avoid situations where you're likely to get infected. I suspect, Sean, the next 2 to 5 years, we will increasingly focus on protecting the vulnerable.
And getting on with our lives, maybe, as much as we can.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, Des, that was a fascinating chat. We are going to dice that interview and push it all over our social media fascinating and a privilege to talk with you, my friend. Thank you for joining us on the platform.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, Sean, and again, congratulations.
Thank you.